All right. Anybody have any questions?
Right here.
I remember on PS2 and the Xbox there was a Midway Arcade Treasures, and you were interviewed in that, and you were like in the little special featurettes, and you mentioned you had some stories about Sinistar, but whenever I hear your credits mentioned, that game's never brought up. And so I was wondering if you ever actually worked on that, and if, since so many games were being developed at the same time, if people like hopped over different projects and like contributed to certain things while you were there.
I mean, there was a lot of that, but actually I did not do anything with Sinistar. I made maybe a couple of the sounds that were reused from some of the earlier games. That was the team, I guess, I think Sam Dicker, who was my co-programmer on Defender, was the lead programmer on that, and actually I think RJ Michael, who went on to like do the Amiga and 3DO and God knows what else, was on that team. And I think maybe Python Angelo, I'm not certain, but yeah, that was a pretty cool game. I guess it was they kind of introduced smooth shading to Williams, where they anti-aliasing the ships and stuff. And so they could do the rotations, and so that was kind of a cool technology, anti-aliasing. And then of course Minecraft came along, and like pixels are cool, So I remember like my son was I don't know, he was like 15 or something, or 10, in the early 2000s, and he was like, yeah, there's this cool new game called Minecraft, and I'm like, oh really? And I try to like stay up to date with him, And then he like shows me this stuff, like these giant pixels. I'm like, man, I spent the last 30 years trying to get rid of pixels. Now it's like the biggest game ever. But yeah, shows. Yeah, it's funny. Like I always have this saying, like the only thing I ever learned in video games over the years is that I don't know shit. So many things end up being, huge. I remember actually we were working on Smash TV, and we had an artist named Lynn Young, Asian woman, and she had this vision of a game where you would grow plants and like water plants and get fruit from them, and so forth. And we're just going, oh my God, this is like the most boring, like. It's like watching paint dry game, and then like 20 years later, Farmville comes out. And it's like, I don't know, unfortunately, we might have discouraged her. But it's amazing, like the best ideas come from, anybody, it's people that don't even know anything about games. Did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was just,
okay.
Are there any games that you like contributed to that you're like maybe not credited for or known for?
I did a lot of the sounds. A lot of my sounds were used on many of the Williams pinball games. Up until maybe 1990 or something, and I ended up programming a pinball game for Team Tomcat.
Oh, nice.
With Steve Ritchie, and I did a lot of the early Atari pinball games. Atarians, Time 2000. Actually, they had Airborne Avenger out on the floor. I don't know if you saw that.
I did not.
Amazing artwork. I wish the flippers worked better.
Yeah.
That was a bad design, and now it's like 50 years later. I'll sit in on a game here and there and do some stuff. But yeah, that's about it. So, next question. Oh, also we're giving away T-shirts here. Every person gets a Godzilla Kaiju Wars. This is our new Raffles. We have a VR game. Go to YouTube and look at the video on that one.
Very cool.
Godzilla Kaiju Wars Motion Simulator VR.
Ooh.
Yeah, for the arcade. Actually, every Dave & Buster's has one. I don't know if you guys. Maybe that's not cool enough for you guys, but. Okay, right here.
Well, following up with Sinistar,
Yeah.
a game you didn't work on,
Yeah.
one of the things I loved about Sinistar was the acceleration logic when you're moving the stick.
Right.
Was there any kind of code reuse, where little aspects of the game would be like, okay, here's how you do acceleration of a sprite over time. Here's the subroutine that does that. Here's a repository that has that code. Was that ever done?
You know, it was interesting. We would, generally a programmer, whatever the game they worked on last, they would steal all the code, and then whoever wrote it, they'd erase their name and put their name at the top. You know, we had some, obviously Defender had some acceleration. I mean, acceleration is very simple. It's just every frame you add something to the velocity, you know. But Sinistar was interesting in that it actually had this, I think it was a 49-way joystick.
Yep.
So it had different levels. The farther you pushed it, the more acceleration you got, and then the less acceleration. So I think that's what you were sensing.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a one shot. It was a multiple level acceleration. So yeah, very perceptive. Yes. Oh, t-shirt.
Oh, thank you.
And you might have to.
Oh.
You might have to trade the sizes.
Yeah.
Or give it to me after you. Okay, right back there.
Yeah, there was another game that used that joystick too. It was Blaster, right?
Blaster, yeah.
But I had a Blaster question. How did you arrive at that version of Paradise? The lips and the dancing girls.
Yeah, I mean, I tell you, this has been a major problem in video games. You know, it's like you have this you have this dream. You know, like, oh my God, it's Paradise. You know, it's all the, you know, the 72 virgins and whatever, or whatever you're interested in, but once you like make it a concrete thing, you know, it's just like heaven. Once heaven becomes concrete, it sucks. You know, it's like, what do you mean that's heaven? That's just like a lot of really good steaks. I eat fish, you know, and you know, it's like you can't. You need almost some things you have to keep them in the abstract, you know, and that's why, you know, when we were doing Smash TV, Mark Tamel had this brilliant idea to, and maybe he was just lazy. You know, we were kind of out of cycles at the time. And so there was the pleasure domes at Smash TV. I don't know if you guys remember this, but that was you know, it was kind of a thing because it was one of these buy-through games, you know, and so it's like the guy can just buy through the game and like, okay, I'm done, you know, it's like, and like, well, that kind of sucks. We want to keep the guy playing, right? And it's just like, and so it was like, okay, well, let's have the pleasure, you know, similar concept, the pleasure domes, you know. But the beautiful thing is we never even did it, at least not initially. And so it was like, and he had like these keys. We had these keys in Smash TV, and that you picked up, you know. And so after, you know, a year or two, you know, people would call us up and like, dude, this is, you know, before the internet. And actually, there was like something called Usenet or something. I don't know if you guys remember. And there was posts like rec.games, video, or whatever. And so people, it was a Smash TV thing, and people were, you know, like, where's these damn pleasure domes? How do you get it? You know. And then after like a few months, like people were coming online and telling people they got to the pleasure domes. You know,
yeah.
just liars. You know, and they were making up like, oh, you need this key and that key, you know, this, and you know, go through the left door, you know, in the Scarface room, you know, you know, and just complete bullshit. But it like gave credence to like, oh, okay, there's pleasure domes, you know, but and it was great. Their income was great on the game, and they kept looking for it. And then it's funny. Then like a year or two later, Terrell and I are like joking. We're sitting in his office and joking about like these idiots that think there's pleasure domes, you know, like this is the stupidest thing ever, you know, we're so proud of it. And actually it turned out Terrell had put in some of his earlier games, I guess he had done a game called like Sneakers and like I think Apple game.
That's Beer Run.
Beer Run, which had Artesians or something, right? And whatever it was, they didn't exist either. And so it's like we're laughing about all this shit, and I guess it turned out our manager was sitting around the corner, was lurking around the corner, and like he's like, "What do you mean about there's no pleasure domes in Smash TV?" And so then we had to fucking do pleasure domes. and it sucked, you know, and like, again, it's like, what, I mean, is it girls, is it boys, is it, you know, I don't know, man, it's like, you know, it just, once you take like a concept of heaven and put it in the flesh, it's never right. So, there's a religious lesson for you.
Yeah, there's a Mortal Kombat character who was created because of internet rumors like that too.
Oh.
Ermac.
Ermac.
Yeah, that was a rumored character, and then they ended up putting him in the game.
Good. Okay, pleasure. Who's but wasn't it about glass? Oh, right, glass, yeah.
Blaster heaven.
Yeah, there you go. Oh,
Yeah.
all right. Green shirt there.
So what's your thoughts on like the legacy of NARC, especially now that with the gift of hindsight, it's probably fair to say that the war on drugs was won by drugs.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. That's the weirdest thing. I know. It's I know it's like Vietnam or something. And like we lost, you know. So. But you know, it is weird. I find it so bizarre because in you know, back when I was a kid, you know, many generations ago, it was like drugs were bad, you know, gambling was bad, you know, extramarital sex was bad, you know, like, all these things were bad, you know.
Sports betting.
And it was sports betting, yeah. Who did all the shit? The mafia, right? You know, prostitution, drugs, gambling, and like, they had it all down, you know, and now it's our government. that is, you know, like they're advertising this shit on TV now. And it's like, okay, that's interesting. I don't know, man. Sometimes I think that, you know, like, I mean, there's so much pot smoke out there. I think we're all stoned. Okay, T-shirt, who was that right there? Okay. Oh, sorry. Atari man.
Quick question, we talked earlier about Robotron,
Yeah.
you also mentioned the Sinistar controller.
Right.
Was there ever pushback from like marketing on these strange control schemes like Defender and Robotron with 2 sticks and so forth?
You know, the marketing people were probably more busy doing drugs, you know. No, they really didn't know shit about games, you know. They were just trying to sell. They were selling wood, you know. Selling wood cabinets and like whatever. They didn't give a shit really.
Yeah, because I know with Atari they got pushed back on things like when they wanted to do Marble Madness 2, marketing said people don't like trackballs.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I remember when like Tamel was pitching Smash TV, and I was going, you know what, that's a bad idea. It's like I already did one of these joystick, you know, 2 joystick games, and it's weird. Like I remember Robotron, I would look at the cigarette burns on the cabinet, and they were like normally there's like really burned up the right side of the play of the control panel, and the left side there's a couple burns. Robotron, there was like equal burns on each side, so it was like, that means there was a ton of, like half the players of Robotron were left-handed. And because it's kind of ambidextrous, and you know, left-handed people have that thing, and so I was like, you know, the demo is really heavily skewed left-handed, you know, on those kind of games, and so it's not a super mainstream market, you know. So I was, you know, my marketing manager hat on. I was like, you know, well, screw this, you know. I was going, it's not going to work, but you know, it's funny. We didn't sell a hell of a lot. I think we sold like 4,000 games. But it was an amazing game. It was an amazing game. And I tell you, people ask me so many questions about that today. And like, I guess the NES, the SNES version was incredible. If anybody had an SNES or an NES. And so today it's like one of the most popular games that I was associated with. But
It helps that controllers now usually have 2 joysticks.
exactly, on the when the PlayStation started doing that. And that was another great frustration of I did. You know, when I did the Robotron controller was, I thought, okay, for sure now all games will have 2 joysticks. So like, who would ever make a game with 1 joystick again? Well, turned out everybody. And it wasn't until, you know, another 10, 12 years until like PlayStation 1 that the, you know, with the DualShock that that became the standard. So I was surprised, but I think again it demanded a level of coordination that people didn't have, you know, because there was, you know, we were all video game newbies, you know. I mean, I'm astounded, like these Xbox and these PlayStation controllers, they have like 28 buttons on them, you know, and I'm like, what the fuck, you know? I thought Defender was bad, you know, like, what is this shit?
I got controllers with like paddles in the back.
Right.
You see the Steel Battalion board for the Xbox?
No, what does that?
It's basically like controlling a real tank.
Oh my god. But it's amazing, I thought the players there are so sophisticated, you know, and it's amazing. Okay, where's the t-shirt? Okay, wait, you were first.
All right. So for me, like, you know, going back to even Defender, Robotron and all that, if I walk into a room and I hear those sounds,
Right.
it just takes me back.
Right.
So when I think about it, like today, like there's cool sounds in video games, but they're all samples of real things that exist.
Right.
So like the cool thing about those games is those sounds didn't exist beforehand. And then I think about like you being put in a position where I have this sound chip and I gotta make sounds. How did you,
Right.
how?
So yeah, that was actually one of the most crazy things about my days was, actually when I worked at Atari doing the Atari pinball games, they had a primitive synthesizer, and it was I think it was 4 bits. And it had like, the resolution wasn't too good, but it had a kind of a frequency, there's like a frequency control and a waveform, which was I think 16 bytes. I mean, they all sounded kind of the same, but it kind of gave me the idea. So I learned a little about sound synthesis, and at Williams, it was really interesting. The soundboard, which was created before I was there, and it was kind of like, it was kind of an approach we had at Williams a lot, was like, a lot of times we had never done video games, they'd never done pinball games or electronic, and it was like, what's the soundboard? And they go, just a processor, memory, and an 8-bit, you know, DAC, digital analog converter. That was the soundboard, you know. So it's like, if you want a sound, write a fucking program, you know. It's like, and I mean, a sound is what? It's just a series of numbers, right? It's just a series. Find a series of numbers that sounds really good, you know. And so it was really challenging. So the first thing and they had some good noise sounds, like obviously you can make a white noise generator, and square waves are really good for white noise. And so, you know, you could get I remember one cheap trick we had was you do some kind of exclusive or bit shifter thing, and you had a couple of taps. It was kind of actually stolen from Atari's. They had a hardware white noise generator that was based on exclusive ORs of chains of shifting bits and wrapping around to the other end. And so that was a great square wave, white noise. And you can create like lightning, you know, if you vary the frequency of that, like lightning is like a sweep from very high to very low, so it's kind of like, you know, like that, it's a super fast sweep, high to low. And so you just kind of, and funny, you hear a noise, you go, what is that? I'm like, oh, it's a, you know, blah, blah, blah. You know, you start figuring out what a noise is. And, but it would take, so the challenge was, that I had was creating different sounds. And so the first synthesizer I did, which I called G-Wave, was and by the way, it could only make one sound at a time. It was monophonic, which is unbelievable. You think about Robotron, it's only one sound at a time. You're interested in monophonic sound.
Defender was that that sounds like it's oscillating.
Yeah. That is, so getting back to the oscillators, or the sound synthesizers, so the first one was this wave synthesis thing. So instead of having 4 bits, this was 8 bits. So I created a table of up to like, the problem is the soundboard, this is ridiculous, had only 256 bytes of RAM. And I think it was 2K of ROM. Actually, the first one was 512 bytes of ROM. So I had to write this sound program that would make 30 sounds in 512 bytes of ROM. And But it turned out, so with this table synthesizer, there was like 16 waveform tables, and then there was like a frequency table, which was just a number that would be stuck in a delay loop. So it would just delay so many cycles and then get the next sample, and so forth. And then there was then I put like echoes in it, which turned out really cheap, because you just shift the bits down, and you get 2 by factors of 2. So I would echo. That was like the early pinball games loved echoes, because it was the games kind of played slower in those days, and you had a lot of dead air, so you just like like the spacey stuff, it's always like, and like I think it was Defender when you shot. I think it was those weird. Those weird, what was this? Like they look like kind of Star X-wing ships or something. And then I think if we shot one of those, it was that. And so anyway, so that was this wavetable thing, and it had other effects where it would like what they call LFOs in synthesis, low frequency oscillators. So it would like every time you completed a sound, it would like a complete cycle of waveform. It would then like add 1 to the frequency or subtract the amplitude or do something weird. And that's how you kind of got those, that kind of stuff, Yeah. And those are used like for bonus countdowns in pinball, but then they were useful for Defender too. And and Rubbertron for your gun, it's that, and I think if you just shoot one side, it's like, maybe not, maybe it's just but. And then, so the other sound is, so we made a pink noise routine, which is actually just triangle waves. So it's just like random triangle waves. Mm-hmm. And that has a it's kind of like waterfalls. It's kind of like, as opposed to, And then there was the weirdest routine, which I think is the most distinguishing noises, was just some weird idea I came up with that was really cheap. And so
I found some Defender sounds.
there you go.
Play them and talk.
And so that is that's like a lightning bolt reversed, And so
Slow down a little.
right, so that was one of those weird stuff. So so that was made with this basically a pulse width modulator, where you had basically, it's a square wave, and you have a high period and a low period. And the high period and the low period were swept with different quantities. So basically the low would shrink and expand, and the high would shrink and expand, controlled separately. And so you've got all those weird, they're very bizarre noises, that were those, like that one noise. And people, they're very distinctive, kind of that all those wow, that kind of stuff. So like the pulse width modulator, the most simple sound they make is kind of like a saw. It's kind of like wow, wow, like that. But then you can, and also mosquitoes. You speed them up, it turns into a mosquito. But then if you do other more complex things with them, they turn into all kinds of weird shit and add LFOs. And there's actually one sound in there that is about 15 minutes long. And because it starts kind of feeding back on itself and doing some kind of wraparound effects and stuff. And these routines are like 50 bytes long.
Is that the coin?
I think that might be one of them. But there is there's one sound that's like, I think it's maybe it's just 5 or 10 minutes long, and this part of it almost sounds like symphony playing. And it was like, I used to kind of smoke and listen to that sound. It's like, put on the headphones, it's like put on the headphones and like lay back and like, oh man, wow, you're in outer space. But it was amazing, and the parameters were like 8 bytes, So it was just amazing. Some of those sounds, and it would take you like half a day to make a sound, you know, because it was just hard, and most of them sounded like crap, you know. And then you just have people do random, you know, you ask somebody like, hey, give me 8 numbers, you know. Screw all the science, you know, just give me 8 numbers. And I think it was like 8 zeros or something, and it turned out that was like the start sound, like, you know, like, what the fuck? How did that happen? Yeah, there you go, yeah. And you're like, how the hell, that was Christina, who was the girl that did Mystic Marathon. She came up with that, you know, she's just walking down the hall, I was like, hey, give me 8 numbers. And that turned out to be that stuff. You know, I spent like a day. Yeah, I spent like a day and I couldn't get anything, you know, and then that was a sound. So it was really kind of a miraculous thing where sometimes it would be so much more than you put into it, you know. But I think the key was having all these parameters, you know, having all these parameters that you could vary with the table and just tweak all these dials, and you had some really crazy stuff. So that was kind of the cool thing about the sound. Is there someone? Oh, you're going? All right, right there.
After sounds, the
Yeah.
colors.
Yes.
Other colors you use.
Oh, the colors,
the
yeah.
Large.
Yeah.
I play a lot large at the convenience store. There's an arcade in large, and that's the neon. Sorry for my English.
Yeah.
But I see those colors. I think you put more colors than the chip can.
Oh, you know, actually, I used some tricks there. So that was kind of, we call them. So we had 16. It was a 4-bit Defender and Robotron, Stargate, and City Star, all these games. 4-bit colors, but we used like the last 3 or 4 colors were what we called a cycling color. And so there was, and it kind of animates the screen, and so there's a red, green, blue cycler. There's kind of red, green, blue, and it just kind of sparkles because it's happening so fast, your eye can't really deal with it. And then there was like the bullets, like things that were deadly, like bullets or mines or something, were kind of a spectrum-y effect, where it would go through, you know, like red to like red to red, green, and then blue, you know, kind of a fade, you know, and then what it would do is it would throw in random full whites, like every, I don't know, 10th of a second or something, it would throw randomly a full white in there, and so you get this kind of like sparkling, dazzling thing that was like, wow, it looked like it was just melted metal or something. Yeah. And so there was, so we used those colors for like, you know, bullets and different things. That's one reason why when you take a picture of the screen, you can't capture those kind of dynamic colors. And, you know, it looks dull because it's like at that frame it was, you know.
But that also has to be because of the CRT versus having a pixel perfect LCD screen, right?
Part of it, but you can do the same thing in an LCD screen. But obviously the phosphor had you know, you can kind of like, and especially if you kind of overdrove the guns a little bit, you know, you can kind of hop it up and really get some, you know, like burning your phosphors in your eyes.
How much agree is a lost art?
Yes, you had a question, right?
Oh yeah, this is kind of more just an idle curiosity. But how did like the tool chains for like building and compiling games evolve throughout your career? Because I've looked at the source code in some Midway games, and even in the late '90s, they were still like written entirely in assembly.
Yeah, I was kind of the last guy to do that. I hated that. You know, it's funny, when I was a senior in college in '76, and I was one of the first guys to use Unix and C, but the compiler was really buggy. They were like testing it out on us, you know, and it was like your program would work one day and it wouldn't work the other. So I said, I hate this shit. And I, you know, it was the guys from Bell Labs I was at Berkeley, and they were like, you know, just fixing the damn thing. You know, it was the first installation, and so I got a bad impression of it. And plus, I didn't like, you know, when you had 1 megahertz, you really didn't have time for any kind of high-level bullshit, you know, and I was always trying to get the absolute maximum performance out of the system. And in, like, for example, the cruising system, that was a DSP, and it was amazing. Like, you could have, like, you could multiply a couple things and add and do, like, you know, one line of code, and it was ridiculous, and they had things like delayed branches, and it was like, you could, like, we had this 164-word routine that was a 3x3 matrix multiplication, you know, and that was like, within the cache of that chip was, I think there was that was how big the cache of the chip was, so it had to fit, you know, otherwise it would 4 times slower. And so, yeah, there was some things that we could do that were semi-miraculous that could, you know, give us an edge over the competition. And it was all about, you know, to me, it wasn't about the convenience of the programmer, it was about making the best game. You know, if you had to really bust your ass and code all night and try to save 3 cycles, and it was part of the game. You know?
So that would just get like run through an assembler and then burned onto chips, I assume.
Yeah, and we had a debugger. We had a debugger, so we had actually some pretty cool debugging stuff.
Debugging retro games is something I've always thought about because I've seen these like giant system, like boxes labeled like simulator for like the Super Nintendo, and I had no idea how they would have been operated.
Yeah, I mean, some of them were actually kind of in-circuit emulators or something that you plug it in instead of the processor or something. And we did for a while, we used this thing called a Motorola Exerciser, which was probably the most horrible thing ever made. Had like an 8-inch floppy disk, and it was a nightmare. But what we ended up doing is we debug in RAM, so we like load into these things that looked like ROMs, but were, you know, they were RAM ROMs, you know, and so we never programmed. And spent like, you know, 3 hours getting the program. But we had our own debugger that we wrote that would stick breakpoints into the code, and then, you know, come out and you see your registers. And we actually got very sophisticated. We had actually a Defender. We had a multi-threaded operating system, so we could run, like, every little guy on the stream was a thread.
Threads go back way far back in games than I thought. I always attributed them to like the 6th generation era, and then there's like N64 games that use them, and now Defender too.
Right, so we were kind of ahead of our time there. We actually had a process dispatch routine that could, I think, dispatch a process in like, I don't know, like 15 microseconds or something. And it was like 8 lines of code. And it's amazing how like basic, you know, programming these things really are. But today, you know, there's so much like you check this, you check, you know, we were just like, you know, bare metal, like, you know, you're on your own. You know, if you blow up the stack, it's your problem. We're not.
No memory management.
You know,
save.
Right. It's just everything. You know, no guardrails anywhere. Although sometimes in debugging mode, we would have debugging code that would check like stack pointers and stuff. And, you know, if they got fucked up, it would give you a breakpoint. But so yeah, so this multi-thread thing. So every carrot, like every lander was a little thread. Every bullet was a thread. Every you know, there was like I think the collision routine was one thread. You know, like some of those light processes were threads. And so it was really cool because you could just create, like we had these macros. I don't know if you know what macros are, but
assembler feature.
Yeah, exactly. Where you kind of, it's a block of code that you have some parameters and stuff. And we had a macros like create a lantern. It was like 1 line of code. You know, it was like kill a lantern. You know, like, and we had like the active list of landers. We had this linked list of landers and I guess objects. Really was like objects, and then we'd look at and see, you know, find where the lander was and kill it. You know, had an ID, you know, all this stuff. And so it was cool because then you could say, oh, okay, I want to create 40 landers. Okay, 40, you know, create 40 landers. And it's like, boom, you know, like that's what Robotron would see. So it was like create 5 runs, create 10. That's fun. 20. It was like, okay, 50. And so it was pretty cool. I mean, you had to have some. We had to actually put some checks in there, primitive bounds checking and stuff to just because once your pointers got screwed up, I mean, you're off. You're in La La Land.
Screw up the program counter, and the processor just yells at you.
But so yeah, we had some cool stuff. We had when in Defender Robotron days, we had a computer had like 48K of RAM, and we'd have our entire editor would be in RAM, as well as the assembler and your source code.
Yeah, I've read Jordan Mechner's books, and in the Karateka one, he describes having to keep all that in RAM and just constantly writing stuff out to disk.
Yeah, and see, we would just keep it in RAM. You'd only write out when you were saving your file. So I mean, it made it was as fast as some of today's systems. I mean, it was amazing.
Extreme risk in that power when a power loss happens, though.
Yeah, that's one. You were screwed. But yeah, so it was some really interesting code that we were working on. But we had to write our own assemblers, our own editors,
Oh, you wrote
all
your own
that stuff.
assemblers.
Yeah, we had to do
Okay.
all that stuff. But I mean, it was fairly simple code. It wasn't crazy. Okay, questions? Okay, way in the back.
I recall a story when you first were introducing Defender, like at a consumer electronics store or something, that you had a few problems getting, to getting it to demo.
Oh yeah. So we had this is like kind of the nightmare of those days. So we had your program was stored in EPROMs, which I guess are kind of like Flash of 1970, and there were like I think 24-pin things, and you'd have maybe 10. Sometimes I think NARC had like 64 EPROMs, and you had to plug these things into sockets, and they were really tricky, and a lot of times you're in the back of a cabinet, and it's kind of dark, you can't see what the hell you're doing, and like it's 7 p.m. in the arcade, and you can't hear anything, it's just worst case scenario, and you have to plug all these things in and not bend a single pin, or the whole thing is off. And so I think we were getting ready for a show, and actually we had, all our program was resident in memory, because we had made, actually what's known as patches, where you had to go into actually the machine language and throw in some patches to save like time of the assembly and all that crap. And so we had this code that was not well documented, and it was just object code essentially. And we would roll it out into, from that memory into a EEPROM, or the set of EEPROMs. And I don't know, somehow it was like 4 a.m. in the morning, and we got all this stuff together, we burned out EEPROMs. It was like, it probably take an hour and a half to do our machine. And then we plug it in, and it was like, fuck. And this is like, this was the big video game show for arcades. This is called the Air Movie Show. And we're like, oh my God, and we just said, okay, let's do it all again. And then it somehow worked, and like 9 a.m. we waltzed in with the proms. So it was a near disaster. But so anyway, I guess I got a long distance throw here.
You have a t-shirt too?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you
absolutely.
forgot.
Okay, you first.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, we're gonna see how we can do this. Get a. Oh yeah! Sign them up and
Should have went up for football instead of video games.
I know. All right, questions. Okay, right there, the Oakland A's. Is that Oakland? Oh, Atari. I'm sorry, Atari. I can't see much.
Amongst your classic 80 titles like Robotron and Defender and
yeah.
maybe games that you would consider that did not get made, are there any that you would like to actually now under the Raw Thrills banner do as either a sequel or a reimagination similar to what you guys have done with Space Invaders?
Yeah, I'd say there are some. Actually, there's one game that actually maybe my all-time favorite game. And this game actually was in my opinion, the first video game. And it was done in 1962.
Wow.
And on mainframe computers. at MIT, and it was called Space War. I don't know if any of you guys ever played Space War. It's fucking amazing. I mean, this is, it's based, if you've played Asteroids or, actually the right-handed defender, thrust fire. But it was a rotate left, rotate right, and the ship was like Asteroids. I mean, Asteroids kind of copied it. And then there was another ship that slightly different, looked like the Enterprise. And Vector, it was a Vector game. And at that time, it actually played on oscilloscopes, if you believe it. But they really did an amazing job. The game had gravity, there was like a sun in the middle of the screen that would suck you in. I mean, incredible, really beautiful math, very, the resolution, those Vector games is just incredible. That was really inspiring. I've always wanted to do something, in that vein, because it was just such a seminal game for me as I used to play it in the basement of the physics lab at Berkeley back in the day. And so that was, and then actually, I don't know if you guys remember, I think it was, I guess it was Cinematronics did a arcade version of that. Well, Star Castle was one of them, but actually Space War was, I think the first one had this huge cabinet. So I actually have one in my basement. I love playing it. I love the fact that it has wraparound, and you start on the edge of the screen. And so most people don't have experience playing it, so you can just turn around and just kill them, before they even get going. They go, what? But yeah, that's a cool game. But it'd be cool to revisit that and do some really cool stuff. Okay, where was the t-shirts? Woo! Where's the one now? God, was there another one? There was another somebody else? Okay. Okay. Question over here, way in the back.
So, Jeff Minter has mentioned you several times, right, as a big inspiration for some of the stuff he's done, with Mamasoft and Lamatron and even the early Defender clone. So, did you track, I guess, that was obviously some years after those arcade games came out. So, did you track that scene and the home computer scene out of the UK in the mid to late 80s and early 90s at all? So that's the first part of that question.
Okay.
And if you did, what did you think about his work? And then the second question on that is, what developer that you haven't worked with that you, and you kind of answered that in the last question, but what developer of the game maybe that you've really loved or thought was fantastic that you hadn't had a chance to work with, that you would still love to collaborate and do something?
Yeah, the first question, I really wasn't that up on the scene. Obviously, the home computer scene, there was some really great innovation in that, and I was too busy doing, Smash TV and cruising and all that crap. But yeah, I thought Jeff, he really has some great creativity, and I love his Lamatron game. A lot of the Robotron clones I was not so happy with. But actually they have one on the floor. I don't know if you saw it in the...
Robot War?
Yeah, Robot Wars 2064. It's and it was kind of, for Atari 2600, it was pretty cool, But,
We gotta finish up.
we gotta finish it up. Okay. So I guess was that my answer? Okay.
And then a developer that you
Oh, yeah.
would like to work with, even today, somebody you admire.
I don't know. Maybe Mark Tabell again. He's pretty cool. What else? I guess Will Wright or something like that. Wouldn't that be crazy?
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to him. He went out. He went off in the universe. He evolved from a spore to an alien or something. Right? I don't know. It seemed like he never came back from that one.
Thanks.
Thank you. Oh, fall short, man.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and here are a few more videos for you to check out.